So Representative Thomas Massie just stood on the House floor and did something that most members of Congress are too terrified to do. He named names, not vague references to powerful people or those connected to Epstein. Actual names: Leon Black, Jess Staley, Leslie Wexner, men who appear throughout the Epstein files in ways that would have anyone else under federal investigation right now. And then he asked the one question that should be keeping the Department of Justice up at night: where are the arrests? Because here's what we know. Over 3 million documents have been released. Documents describing, in Massie's words, unspeakable things. So horrific that over 24 people worldwide have resigned from positions of power. CEOs, government officials, members of parliament. Prince Andrew was stripped of his royal titles and arrested. Peter Mandelson, former UK ambassador to the United States, resigned in disgrace and was arrested. Former Norwegian Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland has been charged. But in the United States, silence. Not a single arrest, not a single investigation that we know of. And Massie didn't stop there. He went after the FBI directly, pointing out that while our FBI director was celebrating in an Olympic locker room overseas, the agency he runs hasn't lifted a finger to investigate the American men credibly implicated in an international child sex trafficking operation. Let's watch what happened, and then I'll tell you exactly why this matters more than almost anything else Congress is doing right now.
The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massie, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Congress created the Department of Justice. Congress funds the Department of Justice. And Congress is responsible for the oversight of the Department of Justice. When will we see justice? I'll tell you what I've not seen. I've not seen any arrests from the revelations in the Epstein files. Over 3 million documents describing horrible things, describing unspeakable things. So much of it redacted. Over 24 people have resigned, CEOs, members of government worldwide. But I haven't seen any arrests or investigations here in the United States from this Department of Justice. Prince Andrew, Duke of York, who has since been stripped of his royal titles due to his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein, has been arrested. Peter Mandelson, who previously served as UK's ambassador to the United States, resigned in disgrace from United Kingdom's House of Lords and the Labour Party, and he's been arrested. Former Prime Minister of Norway, Thorbjørn Jagland, has been charged. But we don't see any charges, arrests, or investigations in the United States. What do we see? We see our FBI director celebrating in the locker room at the Olympics overseas. It's fine to be proud of this country, but we should be proud of this country because we have a system of justice that works. And yet we do not. Who are the men that should be investigated? I'll name them right here. Leon Black. You don't even have to see past the redactions to see that this man needs to be investigated. Jess Staley, accused of terrible things. It's right there in the files. Why is he not being investigated? And Leslie Wexner. Why did the FBI list him as a co-conspirator in their own documents in a child sex trafficking case, and then tell him, according to him, that they had no questions for him? Why is that? Well, the Epstein Files Transparency Act requires the DOJ and the FBI to disclose to us their internal memos and emails about how they made those decisions, whether to prosecute or not prosecute. Yet they have not delivered those memos. And we still don't have the memos and documents and emails from 2008 to explain why Jeffrey Epstein was given such a light sentence in what would have been an open and shut case of child sex trafficking, which allowed him to go back and recommit these terrible crimes, create hundreds of more victims, and ensnare so many other people in his conspiracy. Where are those documents that describe those decisions? We need justice. We want the Department of Justice to get to work, and that's what they need to do now. Madam Speaker, I rise today to let the American people know that this government is under siege. All three branches of this government is under siege by lobbyists and lawyers from a German company named Bayer. They spent over $9 million lobbying the executive branch and the legislative branch so that they don't have to be liable for any damages that their herbicide causes, otherwise known as Roundup. And they're having some success. Now, they haven't had any success yet in this chamber to get that immunity. They've had some success in the state legislatures, which are also under siege, to get this immunity from liability. Look, the Constitution guarantees people a trial if they've been harmed. Why are we contemplating going against the Constitution? The Attorney General has opined favorably for this German company in front of the Supreme Court about getting rid of any liability that they should have for any damages. And the most recent thing that we've seen, the executive branch. By the way, the President's Chief of Staff and the President's Attorney General worked for one of the biggest lobbying firms that's received hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars from Bayer. And maybe that's why we've seen an executive order that says that the production of this chemical from this German company is a national defense priority. And we know why they're doing that. It's to keep them from having any liability. Everybody in this country deserves their day in court. This is wrong. We shouldn't succumb to the lobbyists, not in the executive branch, not in the judicial branch, and certainly not here in Congress, and not in the state legislatures, but there's a lot of money at play. And I implore my colleagues to resist it and do not give them immunity. And I yield back.
All right, let me break down what just happened, because this is one of those moments where someone actually said the quiet part out loud, and you need to understand the full weight of it. First, the Epstein investigation, or lack thereof. Massie is pointing to a documented pattern of international accountability, while the United States does absolutely nothing. Prince Andrew didn't just resign. According to BBC reporting, he was forced to step back from royal duties in 2019 and stripped of military titles in 2022 after a civil lawsuit from Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's survivors, was settled out of court. Peter Mandelson resigned from multiple positions after being named in the files, though as of this script, formal arrest reports remain unconfirmed in major outlets. The key point is this: other countries are treating these revelations seriously. The United States is not. Now let's talk about the three names Massie actually said on the record: Leon Black, Jess Staley, and Leslie Wexner. Leon Black is a billionaire private equity executive and former CEO of Apollo Global Management. According to reporting from the New York Times, he paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million between 2012 and 2017 for tax and estate planning services, which is an absolutely insane amount of money for financial advice, especially given that Epstein had no formal credentials in that field. Black stepped down from Apollo in 2021 after an internal review, but he has never been criminally charged. Jess Staley was the CEO of Barclays Bank and had extensive communications with Epstein over many years. According to the Wall Street Journal, he exchanged approximately 1,200 emails with Epstein, some of which included unexplained coded language. UK financial regulators fined Staley in 2022 for mischaracterizing his relationship with Epstein. He has also never been criminally charged. Leslie Wexner is the founder of L Brands, which owns Victoria's Secret and was Epstein's most significant known client. According to a 2019 New York Times investigation, Wexner gave Epstein power of attorney over his finances and transferred ownership of his New York mansion to Epstein for $1. Wexner has claimed he severed ties with Epstein in 2007 after discovering financial irregularities, but the depth of their relationship and the lack of any criminal inquiry into it is staggering. And here's the part Massie is zeroing in on. According to Wexner's own public statements, the FBI told him they had no questions for him, despite listing him in internal documents as a potential co-conspirator. That's not normal. If you're listed in FBI documents as connected to a child sex trafficking case, and you're a billionaire with extensive financial ties to the primary offender, you don't just get a pass. Unless, of course, you do, which is exactly Massie's point. Now let's talk about what the law actually requires here. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, which passed the House 427-1, mandates that the Department of Justice release not just the files themselves, but the internal decision-making records. That means emails, memos, meeting notes explaining why certain people were investigated and others were not, why certain cases were pursued and others were dropped. Those documents have not been released. And according to Massie, the DOJ is not complying with the law that Congress passed specifically to force this transparency. And here's the kicker. We still don't have the 2008 documents, the ones explaining how Jeffrey Epstein, who was facing federal charges that should have put him in prison for life, walked away with a 13-month sentence in a county jail where he was allowed to leave for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for work release. That deal was orchestrated by then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, who later became Trump's Secretary of Labor and resigned in disgrace when the details resurfaced. A federal judge later ruled that the deal violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act because prosecutors didn't inform Epstein's victims. But we still don't know who else was involved in that decision, what pressure was applied, or why the FBI allowed it to happen. That's what Massie is demanding, and the silence from the DOJ is deafening. Now, let's talk about the Bayer section, because this is where it gets even more disturbing in a different way. Bayer is the German pharmaceutical and chemical giant that acquired Monsanto in 2018, and with it, tens of thousands of lawsuits related to Roundup, the herbicide that contains glyphosate. According to Reuters, Bayer has faced over 100,000 claims alleging that Roundup causes cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Juries have awarded billions in damages. Bayer has paid out over $10 billion in settlements, and now they want immunity. Massie is pointing out that Bayer has spent over $9 million lobbying Congress and the executive branch to get legal immunity from future lawsuits, and it's working. According to reporting from The Intercept and other outlets, several state legislatures have passed laws limiting liability for pesticide manufacturers, and there are ongoing efforts at the federal level to do the same. But here's the mechanism Massie is exposing: the executive order. The Trump administration issued an executive order declaring that the production of glyphosate is a national defense priority. Why? Because if it's a defense priority, companies can claim immunity under the Defense Production Act. It's a legal shield that turns a chemical company's liability problem into a matter of national security. It's brilliant, and it's corrupt. And here's the revolving door part. Trump's chief of staff and attorney general both previously worked for major lobbying firms that represented Bayer. That's not speculation. That's public record. When the people writing the rules used to work for the companies benefiting from the rules, that's not governance. That's a protection racket. So what does this mean for you? If you or someone you love has been harmed by Roundup and you want your day in court, there are now active efforts by one of the most powerful corporations in the world to make sure you never get it. They're not just defending themselves in court. They're changing the law so they don't have to. And if you care about whether powerful men face consequences for enabling or participating in child sex trafficking, you're watching in real time as the Department of Justice does absolutely nothing. Not because there's no evidence. The evidence is public. It's in the files. But because the system protects wealth and power above all else, this isn't a left or right issue. This is a corruption issue. And Massie, who is far from a progressive, is saying it out loud because it's undeniable. Here's the bottom line. We have the files. We have the names. We have the law requiring accountability. And we have a Department of Justice that is choosing not to act. When foreign governments are arresting their elites and the United States is protecting ours, we don't have a justice system. We have a class system. And that should terrify every single person watching this, regardless of your politics. If this breakdown helped you see what's really happening, hit that like button so more people can find this. Subscribe for more deep dives that follow the facts, not the spin. Share this with someone who needs to know what's actually going on, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.